Dogs come from wolves, but how wolf are our dogs? According to a new study in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences, wolfier than we thought, even in the dogs you might not guess. First, a brief history of dog. All dogs are descendants of wolves. I don't just mean dogs and wolves share a common ancestor, though of course they all do. All the wolf ancestors. But we usually use that kind of language when we want to describe a different species of animal, and the species barrier between dogs and wolves is a little fuzzy, much like this little babe. Colloquially, we might talk about a distinction between species as those who can't produce offspring. As much as they might love each other, a rabbit and a deer aren't going to have a fluffy, antler-carrying baby. Rabbit and deer, definitely different species. I cannot scientifically validate the jackalope. Sorry to all the jackalope enthusiasts. We've also got cases like the offspring of horses and donkeys, the mule, or the hinny, apparently, if they come from a stallion and a female donkey. These species branched out between 7 to 15 million years ago, with so many genetic changes that horses and donkeys have a different number of chromosomes. While they can produce offspring, the resulting mules are sterile. For variation on this idea, some species hybrids can, under certain circumstances, produce fertile offspring, like ligers, where the male ligers are sterile but the females aren't. Still, we can see how lions and tigers are definitely still separate species, and that idea of species from a moment ago still pretty much holds. Different species can't produce fertile offspring. Chromosomal mismatch is an excellent indicator that you're dealing with different species. But that doesn't apply to dogs and wolves. Dogs haven't been separate from wolves for millions of years the way that horses and donkeys have. Dogs and wolves still have the same number of chromosomes and absolutely can produce fertile offspring, unlike ligers and mules and jackalopes, oh my. Here, evolutionary biologists might talk about a broader conception of species barrier. Reduced gene flow, otherwise known as, yes, we can breed a wolf dog who can produce fertile offspring, but we don't, do that. In this case, we, humans, deliberately reduced gene flow between dogs and wolves as part of dog domestication in order to produce adorable pupsters like this good golden here. But until now, the idea was that dogs were a group derived from wolves that were selectively bred for traits like human friendliness, playing fetch, and exaggerating hunting characteristics until dogs could do that cool pointer thing where they strike a pose in the direction of whatever they're humans hunting. Anyway, the point is, we didn't necessarily think wolves ever made it back into the dog genome. Wolves were the origin 20,000 years ago. But no, in fact, using a collection of 2,693 ancient and modern dog and wolf genomes, researchers found that a lot of dog breeds have wolf ancestry from 1,000 generations ago, which is far more recent than their origin. How many dogs have this wolf admixture? Almost 2/3 of breeds. This mixin covers, on average, 0.14% of the nuclear genome of free-living dogs, so dogs just running around like the dogs of Chernobyl as opposed to the dogs of my household. There are, of course, dog varieties with far more wolf DNA than that, most notably deliberate wolf-dog crosses, like the Czechoslovakian wolf dog, where the hybridization is the whole point. This particular kind of wolf dog has about 100 times the wolf-specific ancestry in their DNA compared to that average free-living dog. But no, even when you're not getting into wolf dogs on purpose, when 2/3 of breed dogs have this relatively recent wolf admixture, it includes a lot of the dogs you wouldn't think are wolfy. For instance, 0.2% of the Chihuahua genome was derived from this kind of late-game wolf ancestry. Seriously, Chihuahuas are in the 2/3. Goes to show that looks aren't everything. Though, yes, Arctic sled dogs have some of the highest wolf ancestry of dogs without intentional wolf admixture. Overall, terriers, gun dogs like golden retrievers, and scent hounds like basset hounds and beagles had the least late-game wolf ancestry. Though terriers also had high ratings from every science communicator I polled when it came to cuddliness, cuteness, and generally being a good dog. Okay, I may not have been methodologically sound on that particular survey, but she is a very, very good dog. In fact, when looking at common breed descriptors and mapping them against the wolf DNA content, we can see that higher levels of wolf DNA are associated with less domestication-associated traits. There was less wolf DNA in breeds described as friendly and more in those described as suspicious of strangers or independent. That isn't a new idea in itself. Previous studies have definitely correlated these traits in wolf ancestry. But it's also true specifically of this more recent wolf-to-dog gene flow. So it's not purely a function of some domesticated dogs moving further from their original wolf origins than others, but the later introduction of wolf ancestry into aloof-type dogs is higher, or maybe preserved to a greater extent, than in dogs of breeds described in domestication-y type terms. So what do we take from all this? Well, one, it's a fun methodology to see whether, yeah, our noble dogs are full of wolf lineage, holds any water at the genome level. Ancient genomes from the Roman era did not show recent wolf ancestry, despite classical sources insisting that this definitely happened. Maybe it did in some dogs, just not in the samples tested here. On the other hand, those Czechoslovakian and Saarloos wolf dogs do appear to be as advertised. It also gives us tools to better assess dog-wolf admixture from free-roaming dogs, which is a concern in some places like Southern Europe. On a biology level, it's also a good reminder that phenotype is not perfectly reflective of genotype. If it were, I might expect Chihuahuas to be the least wolfy out there, but that's not how it works. Sometimes a handful of genes are very different, either in the code itself or in their regulation, but sometimes those genes make an outsized contribution to how different an animal appears. Chihuahuas still have that wolf in them. And perhaps most of all, this study is a good reminder of how different wolves and dogs aren't. In the history of mammalian life on this earth, dogs and wolves have only begun to diverge, and humans, not chromosomes, are maintaining the species barrier here. Over time, wolves and dogs will likely continue to drift, and someday they may be so different that admixture like this won't be possible. One thing won't change, though. Dogs will still be our best friends. I love them.